Hi, this is Tamara from mooglyblog.com, and in this video, I'm going to be demonstrating how to crochet the Sleepy Time Blanket Baby, which is a free pattern you'll find on mooglyblog.com. You can go to the link in the description or simply search for Moogly blog Sleepy Time Blanket Baby, and the free pattern should pop right up. To make this pattern, we'll be using an 8mm crochet hook. This one is by Susan Bates, and our standard crochet supplies: scissors, yarn needle, and stitch markers. For this pattern, you can also use Bernat Blanket, Bernat Baby Blanket, or, as in this case, Bernat Blanket Ogo. Any of the Bernat blankets that are a 6 super bulky will work wonderfully for this pattern, so it can be a great stash buster too. For this pattern, we'll also use just a small amount of polyfill to stuff the head of our blanket baby. But that's all we need, so let's go ahead and get started. As you can see, the Sleepy Time Blanket Baby is the perfect size for cuddling by toddlers and little ones. There are knotted corners to keep their fingers busy. They sort of feel like those little tags. And there's a stuffed head that's perfect for squishing with a fun little Sleepy Time hat. I've added little sleepy eyes, but of course you can add whatever expression you like, use embroidery floss, and really make it your own. The blanket portion itself has double-sided texture, another great thing for stimulating little fingers, and it's made with Bernat Blanket, so it's super easy to care for. If you're using Bernat Blanket or Bernat Baby Blanket, you can choose your favorite 3 colors, or you can use a Bernat Blanket Ogo, which has 3 colors provided and just enough yarn to make this baby. If you do use the Ogo, you'll want to decide which parts you want to use for the head, the body, and the border. I tend to just start at the lightest color and move from there, but you can, of course, do it in whatever colors you like. If you are using an Ogo, you'll want to go ahead and break that center cord and pull it out before you begin. So the first piece we need to make is the head, and we want to start with color A, whichever one you want to call color A. We're going to start by making a magic circle. So I go over my non-hook forefinger twice towards me, insert my hook under both of those loops, grab the one furthest back, and pull it just under the other one. Then I'll simply yarn over and pull through to lock that loop together. Then we're going to start with our instructions, which say chain 1, there we go, and work 6 single crochets into the ring. When we work into the ring, we want to make sure that we go under the loop and that tail end so that we're able to pull this top end nice and closed. Now, because this is a bulkier yarn, I can go ahead and remove my finger after that first stitch, and then I'm going to go ahead and put my stitch marker right in that first stitch of round 1. I'll move that up to the first stitch of every round of the head because we're going to be working the head portion in a spiral. So we want to make sure to keep track of the first stitch of each round. So there's our first stitch. We need 5 more for a total of 6 single crochets into that ring. And again, I'm just going to go into that loop and make sure that I also work right on over that tail end. So here is 4 and 5 and 6. There we are. So now I'm just going to very gently pull on that tail end, and I like to kind of stabilize it with my fingers of my other hand here while I pull, and make sure that we can get that center pulled nice and tightly closed. There we go. Then we're ready for round 2. Now again, we're working in a spiral, so we don't have a join. We just go right into that first stitch to begin round 2. And for round 2, we're putting 2 single crochets in each stitch. So before we had 6 stitches, round 2 will have 12. But now that we've made that first one, we do want to go ahead and make sure to move that stitch marker on up to that new first stitch. So we need to put a second stitch in that stitch. And then we can move to the next and put 2 in there. So put 2 single crochets in each stitch around for a total of 12 stitches in round 2. So this is what the head should look like after round 2 with a total of 12 stitches made. To begin round 3, we start with a single crochet in the next stitch and 2 single crochets in the stitch after that, and that's our repeat. So we go into the first stitch for 1 single crochet, move that stitch marker up again. There we are. And then 2 single crochets in the stitch after that. 1 and 2. And that's our repeat all the way around. 1, then 2, 1, then 2, for a total of 18 single crochets. And this is what the head should look like after round 3, with again a total of 18 stitches. Now is a great time to go ahead and weave in that tail end for the head. You don't have to trim it off. You can just go ahead and leave it in there for a little bit of extra stuffing. But when you weave in that tail, you want to make sure you go both directions so that it really locks in, especially with this texture. That magic circle will not come out on you. After that, it's time for rounds 4 and 5. And rounds 4 and 5 are simply working even with 1 single crochet in each stitch around. So go ahead and just put 1 single crochet in each stitch for rounds 4 and 5. Now, if you find as you're crocheting that your head is sort of cupping up towards you, go ahead and simply turn that right side out. We want to be crocheting from the outside so that that tail end is on the inside. So after round 5, you should have a good head shape established right here. And now it's time to start closing that back up. So for round 6, we're going to work a single crochet in the next stitch to begin our repeat. So let's move that stitch marker on up again. There we go. And then a single crochet 2 together over the next 2 stitches. So it's 1 single crochet, then single crochet 2 together for our repeat. So to do that, we go into the next stitch and pull up a loop, go into the stitch after that and pull up a loop. We've got 3 loops on our hook. We yarn over and pull through all 3 to finish the stitch. So let's do that repeat one more time. Single crochet in the next stitch, single crochet 2 together over the next 2. Pull up a loop, pull up a loop, yarn over and pull through all 3. So at the end of round 6, you should have a total of 12 single crochets. So you can see after round 6, we're starting to pull in to create that head shape, and now is when you want to go ahead and lightly stuff your head. So you can go ahead and pull up your fiber fill, and we don't want to make this super hard and firm. We don't want it to be too heavy, especially at the top head of our blanket, but we just want to make sure that it's got a little bit of shape in there. So just enough to sort of give it that little round shape. It doesn't take very much at all. But we want to go ahead and put that in here now while it's still easy. And now we're ready to begin round 7. To begin round 7, we're simply going to be working single crochet 2 together in each pair of stitches around. So at the end of round 6, where we had 12 stitches, at the end of round 7, we'll have 6 stitches. So let's go ahead and start that together. Now, as you work these, you'll want to sort of use your fingers that aren't tensioning your yarn to help push that stuffing away from the stitches as you make them, so you don't accidentally pull the stuffing out through the stitches themselves. You just sort of keep pushing it down and around as you work. Let's go ahead and start that first one. I'll get my stitch marker out of the way here. We're going to go right into the next stitch and pull up a loop. And I'm just using my fingers to hold that stuffing away a little bit. Then I go into the next stitch and pull up a loop and yarn over and pull through all 3. And that was our first stitch. So again, I want to make sure to get my stitch marker back in there. There we go. And then we continue to work our way around, single crocheting 2 together in each pair of stitches. Just do your best to try and pull that stuffing back out of the way. If some does pull through, you can just pull it back through to the inside. There we go. So continue to work your way around, single crocheting 2 together. Now this is what the head should look like after round 7. You can see that hole is quite small, but there's still room to stuff just a little bit more stuffing in there if you want to. But as I say, you just want it to have a nice little bit of squish, but basically hold that ball shape. Finally, all that's left to finish the head is row 8, where we're going to close up this bottom by creating 3 slip stitches. So remember, we had 6 single crochet stitches specifically worked around there, single crochet 2 togethers, but now we're going to slip stitch in pairs of those to create a flat seam of 3 loose slip stitches. So this is how we're going to do that. We're going to insert our hook in that first marked stitch. We'll go ahead and get that stitch marker out of the way now. And now we want to push through and find the very last stitch we made. Right there. So we want to go in there as well from the outside, or rather from the inside out, so that we sort of squish those sets of stitches. Let me get that tail end out of the way here. We're going to squish those sets of stitches together. There were 6 stitches. We're going to turn them into 3 by creating a seam here. So after you've gone through the first stitch and the last stitch of the previous row, or round rather, we yarn over and pull that loop up and through. And now we want to take our time and just pull that nicely through, and finally pull that through for a slip stitch. Then we find the next stitch and the one opposite. Yarn over, pull that loop through, pull it up nice and loosely, and then slip stitch. And then finally, there should be just 2 stitches left here that we can get under, right next to each other there. We yarn over and pull that loop through and slip stitch. Then we can cut our yarn and weave in that end and set our head aside. Now we're ready to move on to the arms, for which we'll use color B. We want to make sure that our head is available and that we have 2 stitch markers standing ready. We're going to begin with a chain of 2, so that means we put a slip knot on the hook. However, with this yarn, especially if you're using an Ogo, we're going to use just about every last inch for this body, and you may need to dip into your color C or third color to finish it off. So we don't want to give it a terribly long tail. We really want to make it only about 4 inches or so, basically the minimum amount to be able to weave it in and keep it secured. There we are. So now we'll go ahead and start with our chain of 2. 1, 2, and then we're going to work 3 double crochets into the last chain. So we skip the one closest to the hook and work 3 double crochets in that first chain we made. I like to work into the back hump. I think it just makes it lay a little bit nicer, but of course you can do it however you like. So there's 2 and 3. There we go. Then we chain 2, 1, 2, and slip stitch in that same first chain. There we go. That sort of creates that first little hand portion that'll be on the opposite end of the tie there. Then we are going to chain 8. We're going to be working into these chains, so let's make them a little bit loose. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now we place a stitch marker in that chain we just made, that very last one. Then we chain 11. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Then we are going to single crochet in each stitch at the base of the head. So let's go ahead, get ourselves sort of set up here and pull over our head. And you can decide if there's one side you like better than the other. You can choose to kind of make that the front. Doesn't really matter. We're just going to be working into those stitches at the base of the head. So we can go right into those stitches and we're going to work a single crochet in each one of those. So there's 1, 2, and 3. There we are. So now our head is attached to our body. After that, we chain 12. 1, 2, 3, 4. Pull up some more yarn as necessary here. We want to make sure that we can get into those again to stitch. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. After we've made 12, we add that second stitch marker, that last chain we just made. And now we chain 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Then we skip the chain closest to the hook and work 3 double crochets in the chain after that. So we skip the one closest and work 3 double crochets right into that next one. So there's 1, 2, 3. There we are. Yarn tried to creep up on me a little bit there. Then we chain 2 again. 1, 2. Slip stitch in that same chain that we worked our double crochets into. Get that out of the way there a little bit so it's easier to see. There we go. And then we are going to slip stitch loosely until we come to that first marked stitch. So now we're going to slip stitch right into those chains. And what we want to do is we kind of want to straighten it out a little bit at this point. We want to go ahead and lay it out and just make sure that the tops of those stitches are all sort of facing up as well as we can here. Sometimes when we're doing all this stuff, it gets twisted around. We're working to different parts of the chain. And honestly, a lot of this is going to get covered up, especially all this is going to get tied into that knot. So it doesn't really matter what part of the chain you're working into, but by the time you get back to that marked stitch, you really want to be working to the top of the chain so that we can continue to single crochet really nicely as we come over to the body. That'll make a little bit more sense as we get there. But for now, I'm just kind of going to twist the chain a little bit as I go so that I can loosely slip stitch. Again, I'm going to need to work into these later. So we want to take our time, but I just want to twist that chain a little bit so that I can make sure I'm working into the tops of each one of those chains by the time I get to that marked stitch. So simply slip stitch in each one of these chains until we get to that very first marked stitch. So now that we've slip stitched all the way to that first marked stitch, we're ready to begin the body section. We haven't cut our yarn, we just moved to that next set of instructions, continuing with color B. So now what we're going to do is we're going to work a chainless starting double crochet right in that very same marked stitch. So we want to pull our stitch up to the height of a double crochet. I'm going to go ahead and move that stitch marker out of the way. And then with that loop pulled up nice and high, we're going to secure it at the top with our finger, yarn over with the loop itself, go into that same chain, the one that was marked, pull up a loop, yarn over and pull through that loop and behind the yarn over. And then finally we can release that top loop and yarn over and pull through too. And that will be our first double crochet. If you prefer, you can chain 3. After that, we are going to begin our repeat that will take us all the way across to that next marked stitch. So we want to, again, working into the chains really carefully, at least until we get to those single crochets, we are going to single crochet in the next stitch and double crochet in the stitch after that. That's our repeat. Single crochet in the next stitch, double crochet in the stitch after that. So again, it doesn't matter if you're running into a chain or when you get to those 3 stitches in the middle of the body, we're simply going to continue that all the way across until we've worked through that second marked stitch for a total of 27 stitches in row 1 of the body. And this is what it should look like after row 1 of the body. We can see here where we slip stitched back across that arm essentially, and then we had our first chainless starting double crochet. I went ahead and put a stitch marker in the top of that. Then we worked in that pattern, single crochet, double crochet, single crochet, double crochet, all the way across until we crossed the body, and finally ended with a double crochet in that last marked stitch for a total of 27 stitches. Then we're ready to move on to row 2 of the body. So to begin row 2, we start with a chain 1 and turn, of course, to work back into the previous row. And for this row, we're going to start with a single crochet in the first stitch. And you can mark that again if you'd like, just to help here while we get our sides established. There we go. And then our repeat is going to be double crochet, single crochet. So that means when we have a single crochet, we work a double crochet into it. And when we come to a double crochet, we work a single crochet into it. This is what creates that really great texture. It's just that simple. Double crochets into the single crochets into the double crochets. So at the end of row 2, instead of ending with a double crochet, you'll end with a single crochet, but still with a total of 27 stitches. And now we're done with row 2. As you can see, we're already getting some of that great texture showing up. For row 3, it's going to be essentially what we did with row 1, but now, of course, we don't need to worry about marked stitches or working into any of those chains. We start with a chainless starting double crochet, or again, if you prefer, a chain 3 or a stacked single crochet, however you like to start a row with a double crochet that works for you. I always like to use a stitch marker in the top of mine. And then we've got that same repeat, single crochet in the next stitch, double crochet in the next, ending with a double crochet. But just like the previous row, when we see a single crochet, we work a double crochet into it. When we see a double crochet, we work a single crochet into it. So rows 2 and 3 are going to be our repeat that take us all the way through the body until we're ready to add that final set of legs. So with the Ogo, you need to stop at about 17 for the rows for the length. If you're using a skein of Bernat Baby Blanket or Bernat Blanket, you could add more rows if you like. You can, of course, also add stripes or use one of the variegated versions of blanket. You can have a lot of fun with this center body portion for sure. So just keep working until you have a total of 17 body rows, ending on a row 3 repeat. So that's one of the repeats where you'll start and end with a double crochet. At the end of that, though, don't break the yarn because then we'll add our legs. So now, of course, when you work through row 17, you're going to have a longer body than shown here, but I've just finished a row 3 repeat. So for the sake of time, we're going to go ahead and move on to the legs instructions. The legs, again, we continue on with color B as long as you've got enough. If at some point you need to switch to color C, that's totally fine too. We're going to start, and we want to mirror essentially what we did on the arms here. So we're going to start now with a chain of 9. 1, 2. Again, we want to make sure these are nice and loose. 3, so that we can work back into them. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Then we skip the chain closest to the hook and work 3 double crochets in the chain after that. Should sound somewhat familiar to the arms there. 1, 2, 3. Then we chain 2 again. 1, 2, and slip stitch in that same chain that we made our double crochets in. There we are. Then we're going to slip stitch loosely across until we get to that first stitch there. So make sure it doesn't gotten too twisted there. Get it all nice and straightened out. And then again, we're just going to slip stitch in each one of these chains. Each of these will get tied up when it's all finished, but we do need to work a border in there. So we want to make sure that these slip stitches are loose enough to get our hook into for another stitch or two. So we slip stitch in each of those chains until we get back to our stitches here. And if you'll recall, we ended on a row 3 repeat, which means that that last stitch was a double crochet. So we kind of want to just go back into our pattern while we work across the bottom of the body here. A single crochet into the double crochet and a double crochet into the single crochet. So we just work all the way across the body stitches here for those 27 stitches in the pattern that we were following for the body all along. So now we've worked in our pattern all the way back across the body, ending, of course, with another single crochet in that last stitch. Now we need to add our last leg. So we're going to start with a chain of 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Skip the chain closest to the hook and work 3 single crochets in the chain after that. There's 1, 2, 3. Then we chain 2, 1, 2, slip stitch in that same chain that we put the double crochets in. And then finally, we can break our yarn and finish off for our body. Make sure you go ahead and weave in those ends. Now it's time to bring in color C, which we're going to use to border the body, make the hat, and add any face details that we want to add, as opposed to using embroidery floss, which is another great option. So we're going to go ahead, and you can actually join to any part of the body, but in the instructions, I went ahead and specified to join to the left side of the body. You want to make sure your right side is facing up, so whichever side of the head you feel is prettiest, and really is the only thing you need to judge by. Whatever side you like best can be the right side. Then we're going to go ahead and just join our yarn here. And you can join with a single crochet, or you can join with a slip stitch, chain 1 and single crochet, however you like to do it. But we just want to work evenly all the way around. In general, I like to work 2 single crochets into the side of each double crochet, and then 1 single crochet into the side of each single crochet. But you can definitely, with this yarn and this pattern, just sort of eyeball the distance and make sure you don't have too many stitches to make it roughly and not too few to make it, sort of pull in too close on the sides. We just want to make sure to work as evenly as we can. When we come to those arms and legs, of course, then we do the same thing. We're going to work a single crochet in each of those slip stitches. So whether that was a slip stitch or a chain, whatever is left to work into. We simply single crochet right across that. There we go. And again, this part is all going to get tied, so it really doesn't matter which part of that chain you work into. It's totally about just whatever presents itself and is fun and easy for you. When you get to those little hands and feet, or whatever you want to call them, sometimes I like to add a couple extra stitches, especially as I come around this curve. I might add 2 single crochets into each of those double crochets. Tends to just help it lay a little bit nicer. But you can really, add extra stitches, however many you feel you need. Don't add extra stitches if you feel like you don't need them, the way yours is laying. Just work your way all the way around that little hand or foot there. There we go. And then as you come back around on the opposite side of the limb that's going to be tied, you can again just go right back into those same spaces if you like, right opposite the stitches you did before. Makes it a little quicker. And work our way back across until you get to the body here. And then, of course, at this point, you're working into the bottom of the body. So then you can simply single crochet in each stitch. And essentially that's it. We're just working an even single crochet border all the way around until you get to that head. When we get to the head, we'll handle it just a little bit differently, so I'll see you when we get there. Now, when we get to the head, obviously we can't just single crochet through. What we're going to do instead is surface crochet. So you want to bring your working yarn to the back of the head, and then basically we're going to insert our hook in that next stitch, and you can work into either the body or the head. I actually prefer to go back up to the head here. It creates a little bit of a cleaner line. We've got 3 stitches in there, so we want to make sure go in 1. And we pull that yarn up from the back and through, and just pull it right on through as for a slip stitch. Find the next stitch. And then our third one. Just pull that yarn up from the back, and if I pull the hook out of the way here, you can see that creates a nice line right there across the base of the head. Then, when we've gotten to the other side, we simply go back to single crocheting in each of those stitches around. Finally, we need to make a hat for our sleepy time blanket baby. We're going to start again with color C and making a magic circle. Get our hook in there, lock our circle together, and start with a chain 1. Then we're going to work 4 single crochets into the ring. Just as before, we want to make sure that we work over that tail end as well. And just as before, it's a good idea to use a stitch marker in that first stitch because we are going to be working in a spiral for this hat again. There we go. So there is 1 single crochet in the ring, and 2, and 3, and 4. There we are. Then we can go ahead and take that tail end and pull the top of our hat closed. Again, we just want to make sure and take our time so that we don't break our yarn. Then we're ready for round 2. Again, we're in a spiral, so no joins needed. Go right to that first marked stitch. There we are. And because there's only 4 stitches, this is going to try and pull up really close, and that's okay. Don't worry too much about it for now. We'll get our first single crochet right in that first marked stitch, move that stitch marker on up. There we go. And then we want to get a second single crochet in that same stitch. And then put a single crochet in the stitch after that. And then we need to do that repeat 1 more time. 2 single crochets in the stitch after that. 1 and 2. And a single crochet in the stitch after that. You can see that takes it all the way back to our stitch marker. Now at this point, I'm going to go ahead. You can see it really wants to be wrong side out again. Again, a great time to go ahead and weave in that end and then just flip it right side out. Might have to use the end of your hook, give it a good push, but it should push out to this, start creating this really cone shape here. Then we've got 6 single crochets made in round 2, ready to go ahead with round 3. We start with a single crochet in each of the next 2 stitches. So that first one goes in the marked stitch, We move our stitch marker right on up. There we go. So there is one in that stitch, one single crochet in the next stitch, two single crochets in the stitch after that. And that's our repeat for this row or round. So there's one and two. And then we do that repeat again. So it's one and one, and then two in that last stitch right before the stitch marker. There we go. So you can see now it's starting to form that cone shape. If that little tail end is getting in your way and you didn't trim it off after you wove in your ends, you can just go ahead and do your best to sort of tuck it up into the point there. And now we're ready for round 4. For round 4, our repeat is single crochet in the next stitch. Move that stitch marker on up. Then two single crochets in the next stitch. 1, 2. Then single crochet in each of the next 2 stitches. 1 and 2. Then we do that repeat one more time. Single crochet in the next stitch. 2 single crochets in the stitch after that. 1, 2. And then a single crochet in each of the last 2 stitches. 1 and 1. So at the end of round 4, we should have a total of 10 stitches. To begin round 5, we begin with 2 single crochets in the next stitch. That's how we begin our repeat. So there's our first one. Move up the stitch marker. Then our second stitch. So 2 single crochets in the first stitch. We pull up a little bit more yarn here. There we go. And then we do a single crochet in each of the next 4 stitches. So find the top of our stitch there. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And we do that repeat one more time. 2 single crochets in the next stitch. 1, 2, and then single crochet in the next 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. So at the end of round 5, we now have 12 single crochets made. To begin round 6, we start our repeat with a single crochet in each of the next 4 stitches. So we go in the first one, move up our stitch marker. Here we go, get that back down there. So there's 2, 3, and 4. Then we finish our repeat with 2 single crochets in the next stitch. Actually, we don't quite finish it yet. So we've got our 4 single crochets, then 2 single crochets in the next stitch. And then our repeat has 1 more single crochet in the next stitch. Almost missed that one. There we go. So now we do that whole repeat again. Start with single crochet in the next 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2 single crochets in the next stitch. 1, 2, and then finally single crochet in the last stitch. So then at the end of round 6, you should have a total of 14 stitches. To begin round 7, we start our repeat with a single crochet in each of the next 2 stitches. So we go into the first one, move our marker, single crochet in the next stitch, pull up some more yarn here, there we go. Then 2 single crochets in the stitch after that, 1, 2, then single crochet in the next 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. All this moving around of our increases is to just really keep that really nice cone shape. If we let our increases line up, it would create sort of an odd little more pointy shape. We want to make sure to keep our nice round shape here. So let's do that round 7 repeat one more time. Single crochet in the next 2. 1, 2, 2 single crochets in the next. 1, 2 in that same stitch, then single crochet in the next 4. 1, oops, 2, there we go, and 3, and 4. So now, at the end of round 7, we have a total of 16 single crochets. For round 8, we begin our repeat with 2 single crochets in the next stitch. So we want to make sure to move up our stitch marker here. So there's our first one. We put a second one right back in that same stitch. And then we single crochet in each of the next 3 stitches. 1, 2, 3. And that's our repeat for round 8. This one, we're going to increase not by 2 stitches, but by 4 stitches. So let's do that repeat one more time together. 2 single crochets in the next stitch. 1, 2. And then with a little bit more yarn here, single crochet in the next 3. 1, 2, 3. So you'll need to do that repeat twice more. 2 single crochets in the next, single crochet in the next 3. So now, at the end of round 8, you should have a total of 20 single crochets made, and we're ready for round 9. Our round 9 repeat begins with a single crochet in each of the next 2 stitches. So we go into the first stitch, move up the stitch marker. So there's 1 and 2. So a single crochet in each of the first 2 stitches, then 2 single crochets in the next stitch. 1. Second one's in that same stitch, then single crochet in the next 2. 1, 2. And that repeat we're going to do 3 more times, so let's do one more time together. Single crochet in the next 2 stitches. 1, 2. 2 single crochets in the next stitch. 1, and a second one right back in that same stitch. Then single crochet in the next 2 stitches. 1, and 2. So I'll see you at the end of round 9 with a total of 24 stitches. So this is what the hat should look like after round 9. Round 10, we're simply going to finish it off with a nice little edge here, and then we want to break our yarn, leaving a long tail for sewing. So for round 10, we simply slip stitch, let's try that again, slip stitch in that first stitch there. And go ahead and take that stitch marker right on out. We're all done with it now. And now, like I say, we want to leave a long tail for sewing. We're going to be using this tail to sew the hat onto the head. So if you sort of go around the length of that seam 2 or 3 times here, that's how I like to eyeball it. My highly scientific method here, but it generally works. There we are. And that should be enough of a length to sew it on with. So then we can simply go ahead and pull that tail on up, and we're ready to sew our hat onto our head. Now it's finally time for assembly. And this is the chance where you can add a face to your sleepy baby head here if you want to. Again, this is totally optional, and you can leave it blank if you'd like. But you can use embroidery floss, you can use some of color C or color B if you happen to have any left over, whatever you like to add whatever face you want to add to your baby. I simply added a pair of kind of sleepy eyes here, so I took a length of color C. So I'm going to come from behind the back of the head. I'm not going to worry too much about weaving any of these ends in or anything. It's all going to get covered up by the hat. But before I start sewing in those eyes, I do like to take those stitch markers again and sort of plot out where I think they'll look best. So let me pull that needle out from the back of the head here. I'll just lay it down, sort of just give it the eyeball here and say, where do I want those eyeballs to land? It's always a good idea to sort of plan out those details if you can, and I love stitch markers for the purpose. But of course, if you are self-confident and self-assured, you can definitely just jump right in. I like to place my eyes starting about halfway down the head. It's just sort of one of those tricks that make it look a little bit more babyish. But again, it's totally up to you to customize at this point. So then I'll go ahead and take my yarn needle here, and I'll just come from the back of the head. I'll come up sort of on one side of the eye there that I want to make. Go ahead and move that stitch marker on out of the way for the first one here. Then I'll sort of come down to where I want the bottom of that eye to be and come back up where that other side of the stitch marker came out. And you may need to pull these out and adjust them a couple times. They don't always turn out perfect on the first try. That's why I like this method. I can just pull it all out if I need to start over. Definitely have done that before. So now I'll go right back down into that spot. Come out where I'd like the other eye to start, approximately here. Try and get that maybe a little bit more even than my stitch marker was. Get that next stitch marker out of the way. And pull that on down. That sort of creates that first little V there. You can tighten that up if needed, but don't pull too tight. That can really distort the face there a little bit. And then again, we're just going to go down where I think the next one ought to be and come back up. And as I say, don't be afraid to pull these back out and really play with that placement a few times and maybe even try different styles of eyes and things. There's lots of fun different embroidery techniques for amigurumi out there on the web. So I'll just finish that up by going right back down into that spot and all the way to the back of the head again. Come out sort of near that other one there. There we go. Just gently pull that on through. Give her head another little squish here. And if I like the way that's done, then I can simply finish that off in the back and we're ready to add our hat. So step 2 for our assembly is to sew on that hat. I like to make sure that the end here where it comes out goes in the back. And then I just slip it right over the head here. And any little ends or anything left over, you want to make sure those are tucked nicely inside. And then I just pull the hat down until I like where it looks. It's all yarn, so it's nice and squishy, has a little bit of stretch. But one thing I really like to do here is make sure that the back of the hat reaches that top seam where we sort of did that surface crochet through. We want to cover up all the way down to that border on the back of the head there. And that's where we'll start sewing, so that'll make it a little bit easier as well. Then we can sort of just zhuzh it up here as needed, and then we simply sew it right onto the head. So let's take a few of those stitches here together. I want to make sure again that it's lined up right where I want it, and we can adjust that a little bit as we go as well here. There we are. Get his little sleeping cap on nice. And then we can simply take that yarn end and start sewing into the body. Now we're going right into where this border is right now, so I'm not too worried about colors or anything, but we do want to make sure that our needle doesn't show at the front right now. And pull that stitch right on through. There we are. And then basically it's kind of like a running stitch. We're going to just stay right along that last row of our hat here and go into the head and try and come back out. There we are. It helps to sort of squish the yarn together there so you know that you're catching both of those layers. But then I simply tend to work my way all the way around the head one direction. And you can see there's spaces that get mixed, but then I'll go around it again if I need to, or come back over those sections if I feel like they need to be down a little bit more. But I'm just going to really kind of squish the yarn together here so that I can go into one stitch and do my best to come back out in the other one there, catching some of those head stitches inside that stitch. And again, you don't want to pull too tight or it can cause some warping around here. We just want to really gently pull in on that. And as we go, of course, adjust to make sure it's even around the face. And we're not getting too off track here. But you just take your time and sew all the way around the head. And then, of course, when you get to the end and you feel like your head is secured enough for your taste, then you can go ahead and weave in this final end. Our final step for our Sleepy Time Blanket Baby assembly is to tie those arms and legs. So we've got our chains here, or chains and slip stitches with single crochets worked around. This is the part we're going to tie. There should be 4 of these, 1 on each corner. I like to give it a little bit of a stretch before I tie it. Just seems to make it a little bit easier, kind of like a balloon in a way. And then we're simply going to tie it in a knot. I like to sort of just wrap it around and push that end right through. Now it will be tight. There we go. We want to go ahead and use some muscle. This yarn can take it. We just get it in a good knot, give it a little zhuzh there, make it as tight or as loose as you like, and you're all set. Do that with all 4 corners and you'll be finished with your Sleepy Time Blanket Baby. And that's how to crochet the Sleepy Time Blanket Baby. Once again, that's a free pattern you'll find on mooglyblog.com. Thanks so much for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe.